What starts here changes the world. I have a few suggestions that may help you on your way to a better world. And while these lessons were learned during my time in the military, I can assure you that it matters not whether you ever served a day in uniform. It matters not your gender, your ethnic or religious background, your orientation, or your social status. Our struggles in this world are similar, and the lessons to overcome those struggles and to move forward, changing ourselves and changing the world around us, will apply equally to all. So here are the 10 lessons I learned from basic SEAL training that hopefully will be of value to you as you move forward in life. Every morning in SEAL training, my instructors, who at the time were all Vietnam veterans, would show up in my barracks room, and the first thing they'd do was inspect my bed. If you did it right, the corners would be square, the covers would be pulled tight, the pillow centered just under the headboard, and the extra blanket folded neatly at the foot of the rack. It was a simple task, mundane at best, but every morning we were required to make our bed to perfection. It seemed a little ridiculous at the time, particularly in light of the fact that we were aspiring to be real warriors, tough, battle-hardened SEALs. But the wisdom of this simple act has been proven to me many times over. If you make your bed every morning, you will have accomplished the first task of the day. It will give you a small sense of pride, and it will encourage you to do another task, and another, and another. And by the end of the day, that one task completed will have turned into many tasks completed. Making your bed will also reinforce the fact that the little things in life matter. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never be able to do the big things right. And if by chance you have a miserable day, you will come home to a bed that is made, that you made. And a made bed gives you encouragement that tomorrow will be better. So if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed. During SEAL training, the students are all broken down into boat crews. Each crew is 7 students, 3 on each side of a small rubber boat, and 1 coxswain to help guide the dinghy. Every day, your boat crew forms up on the beach and is instructed to get through the surf zone and paddle several miles down the coast. In the winter, the surf off San Diego can get to be 8 to 10 feet high, and it is exceedingly difficult to paddle through the plunging surf unless everyone digs in. Every paddle must be synchronized to the stroke count of the coxswain. Everyone must exert equal effort, or the boat will turn against the wave and be unceremoniously dumped back on the beach. For the boat to make it to its destination, everyone must paddle. You can't change the world alone. You will need some help. And to truly get from your starting point to your destination takes friends, colleagues, the goodwill of strangers, and a strong coxswain to guide you. If you want to change the world, find someone to help you paddle. Over a few weeks of difficult training, my SEAL class, which started with 150 men, was down to just 42. There were now 6 boat crews of 7 men each. I was in the boat with the tall guys, but the best boat crew we had was made up of the little guys, the Munchkin crew, we called them. No one was over 5'5". The Munchkin boat crew had 1 American Indian, 1 African American, 1 Polish American, 1 Greek American, 1 Italian American, and 2 tough kids from the Midwest. They out-paddled, outran, and outswam all the other boat crews. The big men in the other boat crews would always make good-natured fun of the tiny little flippers the Munchkins put on their tiny little feet prior to every swim. But somehow these little guys from every corner of the nation and the world always had the last laugh, swimming faster than everyone and reaching the shore long before the rest of us. SEAL training was a great equalizer. Nothing mattered but your will to succeed, not your color, not your ethnic background, not your education, not your social status. If you want to change the world, measure a person by the size of their heart, not by the size of their flippers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Karis Project podcast. Today we have with us Jessica Saxton, who does the Justice Without Limits and is a family court advocate and is advocating for people to get freedom for their children and justice and protection from harm and so forth. And yeah, so I'll let you introduce yourself. You can do a little bit better than I can, probably a lot. But welcome to the show.
That's okay. Thank you. And thank you for having me. And thank you for what you're doing as well. And I noticed, what is it? Limitless Justice. I love
Yes.
it.
Yes.
I love it. That's awesome. So I'm Jessica Saxton, and I got involved in family court back in 2021. Didn't really quite understand what was going on. I knew something wasn't right. This didn't feel like justice. This didn't feel like what I believed courts were supposed to be. And then that led me into a path of deeper investigation, finding other parents in similar situations that had the same injustices applied to their family. And then that led me to where I am today, which is an advocate on a national scale, really trying to expose the crimes that are happening against our families in family court, juvenile court, probate court, criminal court, all of the courts. They are all acting criminally against us. I'm sure there's a good judge out there, but we're still searching. So anyway, that's why I'm here. Dale, thank you for having me. I so much appreciate it. It's nice to see you again, by the way. I think we connected a year. It's been a year ago, I think, is when we first connected, or probably longer than that.
Yeah, it's longer than a year, but it's probably been about a year since we talked last before recently. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I was looking at Joe Oltman, and he was talking about some of the Colorado judges that are wanting to blow the whistle, and they're fearful on how corrupt the system is, and which is kind of bringing to light something that a lot of people already knew, and things that, you know what I mean, that I started to track as well, because I watched the judges committing crimes and shielding crimes. And this is like, I mean, and then they bring the idea of the judicial immunity, which is just, I mean, it's nonsense. Like, at the end of the day, the stuff that they're doing, I mean, you shouldn't be able to do. But anyway, so let's go a little bit back, a little bit over to you. And what is it like that you saw that you were like, okay, something is majorly wrong? What triggered it for you?
I remember that in going through the process of the divorce and entering into court, there were things that I put together for my attorney. I mean, meticulously put together. Literally walked in and said, "Hey, Mr. Attorney, I've done your work for you. Here's a 9-inch binder with all of the evidence, not just piled into a, something that you can't search, but literal, chronological order, files. Here's tabs. I had 3 copies of all of the evidence. Everything was there for this dude." And I remember sitting in court thinking, does he have dementia? He's an older guy. He's also a sitting judge in a neighboring county. And I'm sorry, in a neighboring city. And I was like, does he have dementia? Because he's forgetting things. I thought that he was forgetting things. I have since come to find out that he has had multiple clients who have this same exact thought process. Does this dude have dementia? The answer is no, he doesn't. He literally railroaded all of us in court. That was when I started just thinking, what is going on? What in the ever living Hades is going on in this court? I started entering things into evidence, proof of domestic abuse, fraud, theft, just multiple things. And I'm sitting here, I could not make sense of it. I still could not make sense of it. And to some of your listeners, people that are listening or people that are even new into family court, you'll kind of go through this process where you can't quite believe it. Even now, I still can't believe it. But I think what's worse for us is that when we try to explain what's happening in family court to someone who hasn't actually gone through it, or criminal court, or probate court, chancery court, circuit court, all of the courts, once you're in it and you're trying to explain to someone who has never been there, it's very difficult. They look at you like you have four eyes. And I think that that's one of the biggest aspects of the advocacy work that we are doing, is to try to let John Smith and Jane Doe, our neighbors, let them know how the courts are operating, how easy it is for your children to be dropped off at school and never return. Literally never return. You drop your children off at school, you go to pick them up, and you don't see or hear from them again until they're 18. This is happening every single day in America, and it is because of the judges. At the end of the day, it is the judges who allow for all of these state agents to take our children under the color of law. And so because of that, I'm focused on accountability for the judges.
Oh yes, and I understand that most people, because the way they've been conditioned, they hear a family court and they're like, oh, you must have did something wrong. That's the automatic assumption. Well, you must have been a bad parent because you had your kids taken. But that's not the case, because my first run-in with unlawful state interference came in 1997 with my oldest daughter.
Wow.
It was
Okay.
She was 4 months old. It was on my birthday. She was born March 16th, and my birthday is July 16th. So on my birthday, I got a call that, oh yeah, Child and Family Services came and picked up your kid. And then I was like, what? Right, from the mom. And so I was never told what the issue was. And, so they still didn't provide it even later after, but they basically admitted they didn't really have a reason. And they took my kid away. And I lost all parental rights. And then I remember got a lawyer and all that kind of stuff. And the lawyer's like, you're going to lose. I was like, what? And so I remember the court, my daughter's maternal grandmother was trying to take custody, and she gave away all of her kids. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. But I remember when they were saying that they were going to put my daughter in foster care with her. And I remember getting up in the courtroom and I said, over my dead body. And I walked out. You could hear a pin drop. Everybody was like, and I went and downloaded the entire Child and Family Services Act of Manitoba. I went ahead and I went through, looked through the law, the charter, and so forth, the Canadian Constitution. And basically all the notes that I took, I broke down wherever they were violating the charter. And I sent it all out in a single day to a bunch of people, like to the government, to the media, to a bunch of other agencies that were related to that, and to the area director of Child and Family Services. When I did that day, by the time I got home, within 15, 20 minutes, I got a phone call from the area director of Child and Family Services and asked me what I wanted to do. They reversed their course because I was at the elected official's office so often that their aides knew me on first name basis, right? And they knew what I was doing. I'd always bring in that stuff. But when I came in and brought that out and they saw the list of whoever else got it, they were like, no. And I was just like, they need investigation, had all this documentation. And so they backed away. And so that was my first run. And after that, like, that almost broke me, right? Like, I mean, I was wiped out and it took me a long time to recover. Then in 2020, all over again, right? Yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think one of the things that I'm trying to make sure that people understand is that this whole idea of judicial immunity, it's really not true in regards to criminal sanctions. Judges are not immune to being charged or indicted with a crime. The judicial immunity is only in civil lawsuits, and that's it. So that's one of the things that we're focused on, is we're trying to collect the data through open source intelligence, or so we're collecting the data, we're analyzing, where did these judges mess up? Did they deprive you of your rights? If they deprived you of your rights, that is an absolute federal crime. It's a violation of 18 USC 242. If they conspire with other people to violate your rights or your children's rights, that's also a federal crime. And so I think that what I've seen over the last year, because I've only been doing this, so April 9th of this year, 2026, that was my 1-year anniversary. I'm deciding to go public and really do what I'm doing now. seen over the last 12 months is, one, we have had a massive influx of people becoming aware, not only their rights, but the laws that are over these judges, the laws that really control and govern our government. And they're starting to use it. And I think that's why we're seeing some of the cases that I have recently heard, judges are actually ruling according to the law, whereas for the last decade they haven't. But now they're actually starting to listen to us. Now I think that's them trying to cover up for their previous actions and hope that nobody else has really uncovered the things they've done. But it's too late. It's way too late. There's no statutory limitation on fraud. There's no statutory limitation on many of the things that they've done. And so we've collected this data. We have over 4,000 judges. We have actual names. We have the names. We have the county and the state of over 4,000 judges, where 4,000 individuals in America are willing to testify under penalty of perjury that the things they're saying are true and accurate. And with that these judges have violated the law. That's that's huge when you consider the fact that there's only about roughly 6,000 family court judges in America, and this survey was done focused on family court and family court victims.
Yes,
So.
and this is good. I mean, the record needs to be kept, and now something needs to be done with it. And I mean, this is because when I was in, my background's mechanical engineering. I'm a technologist. I got a bachelor of technology, and I was doing HVAC infection controls for the COVID pandemic, and I blew the whistle, and they used the family court to come after me, to suppress me, right? Like they did it wrong off the get-go. And so they used this as a mechanism because I had the same judge, same day, both cases. Like one I was suing the police and some other people, and the next one was the family matter, same judge, same day. Like, I mean, he wiped me out financially. Was going into court, I got arrested. The court, like I got the documents from the police that said that the court told them to keep me out of court the day before. And they had tried coming to my house, and I was like, no, here's the service you avoided. There you go. And they filmed it and slammed the door. And they arrested me going to the court. And then I got strapped to a bed, drugged against my will, wiped out everything. So from that.
Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. And so from that, I ended up taking everything that they did because they settled my entire divorce. The only thing they didn't do that day was child custody. And they did it later. But they divided all the property, the house I was living in. They ordered it sold. They gave custody to my ex who had already abducted her, which is a crime under the Canadian Criminal Code. And then they put a no contact order on me and then cut her off from my oldest daughter, right? And all of this done ex parte on a first degree. This is not lawful. There's no law that justifies that. And so.
Did all that happen in Canada, or did that happen here?
It happened in Canada, but then I went to the States.
Okay.
My daughter went to the States, and she had a run in the family court when somebody pulled a firearm on her. But they weren't married. They didn't have kids, and they pushed it in the family court so they could get away from it because the guy was a trafficker, right? And so, oh yes, and so they hid that. And then I went to go in, and then we had some instances in the courts in South Carolina to file against them, right, under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, and they just like completely ignored it. The judge actually had 5 days and waited 276 days to write a response when the law says 5 days, right? So that was a problem. And then, I mean, when I went to the States, there was a lot of nonsense. But the whole thing is I started to track the actions of the judges. And I did a statistical analysis on the different courts and how the judges were acting, and started to see patterns coming up. And that's where you begin to start seeing where it's evidence, where you take the patterns and you put them together, and they can't say that this is random, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yes.
It's huge. It's huge. And when we can get the pattern and get the names of these judges, get these hot spots, how can they deny any of it? we can prove every single bit of it across the country. Um, it, it the retaliation, like what you were just saying. So I think that maybe we should talk about this off the air sometime, but we should probably include that in some of our analytics nationwide, because there was, for instance, there was a man down in Florida. He got 8 years in state prison because he failed to upload his driver's or update his driver's license.
How many
after he
years you
moved.
said?
He got 8 years. He was actually sentenced to 10 years, but he was in for 8 for failing to update his driver's license after he moved. It was just a simple mistake. I just moved a few doors down, totally forgot, right? What they were actually trying to do was suppress years worth of investigative work that he was doing against many of the departments in Florida. And that's how they got him. So very similar to what they did with you, retaliating against you and your family. He didn't have a family. He's not married, doesn't have children. But they put him away for 10 years, or tried to put him away for 10 years. He was there for 8. All for exercising his First Amendment rights to free speech, freedom of press, all of the things. I mean, this happened many years ago, but I think we're at a point in history where we're all coming together. It's not really so far out there anymore. It's not a conspiracy theorist talk anymore to speak about these things publicly. The conspiracy is everywhere. It's not a conspiracy anymore.
Yes.
It's actually happening. Anyway.
But conspiracies are necessary to commit the crimes that they're committing. And that's why they made it a bad word.
That's right. Oh, the conspiracy theorist thing was completely propagandized. I mean, that was it had to have been some type of DARPA, some type of operation, psychological operation on the American people to try to deter them, try to make all of us that were actually interested in finding out who's conspiring against us and trying to make us look like the crazy ones. Conspiracies are theories. I mean, they're only false for like 6 months and then they all become true. So.
Yes, because they just try to get you not to look, and getting that information is correct. And all these, there's enough information to convict all of these people. The problem is that we're having is that people are trying to, you can't go to the courts because the courts can't fix themselves. And I would recommend everybody go out and read the Federalist Papers, read them and understand how this works. And I've told people this from time and time again. The Constitution is designed to work a certain way. It's like a machine, and you have gears that fit together, and they have to be tolerant to a specific a measurement. Otherwise, it's not going to work. They're going to seize, and it's not going to move. Well, the Constitution is the same way. It's designed to work, stay the same. It's never supposed to change, because if it changes, then you don't have the same country that you did when the Constitution was signed. And in order to preserve that, you need it to stay the same. Other things can change, but this has to stay the same because that's your standard that you measure things from. And then now with the courts are usurping the authority of both the executive and the judicial branch. First of all, sheriffs that work in the courts, yes, they may assist with the law and order of the court, but if the judge steps to the line, they're supposed to be there to grab him off the bench because they represent the executive and not the judicial.
Exactly. 100%. We're actually dealing with that right now in Blount County, Tennessee. Last Thursday, I was at the county commission meeting, and I drafted, you can go to justicewithoutlimits.org, go to the menu and just click on Tennessee. You can see the petition that I drafted for an ouster for the sheriff. It's called a writ of ouster. The different states have different ways that you can do it, but in Tennessee, there's a couple of different ways. One of which you can take it to the county attorney, and the county attorney has a duty, according to Tennessee law, they have a duty to investigate. And if upon that investigation is found to be true, they have a duty to prosecute or send it to the DA for it to be prosecuted. Well, this was in regards to an order that 6 judges in Blount County have put over the entire courthouse. In this order, you're not allowed to bring phones into the courthouse. If you're found to have a phone or recording device or a smart watch or anything that is a portable device, if you're found to have it and you are not either authorized by a judge or you're not an attorney or a necessary court employee, then you can be held in contempt of court. That's what it says on this order. You can also be sanctioned, you can be arrested, you can lose your property, and then it also talks about how if we damage your property for taking your property and seizing it, it's not our fault. It is the most asinine piece of document. You can't even call it an order because it's not an order. And this is where we get into the separation of powers issue. Go to Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution. These judges have taken on the role of a legislator, and they have imparted a law over this one little tiny courthouse. But in doing so, this order, which nobody had an adjudication hearing for this, nobody who this order is over, none of us were ever heard on that. So you got due process violation number one right off the bat.
Yes.
They're not the legislative branch. Number two, they cannot create law. Number three, it has been confirmed time and time and time again. If the government is recording you, you're allowed to record the government. Now, what they're doing in Blount County is they are stripping us of our rights to be able to document the crimes that are happening in these courts. Multiple. And we're talking about thousands of families. I have the names of thousands of families out of Blount County, Tennessee, who have been negatively affected by this court order. People who have been yelled at, threatened by these judges, people who these judges have said obscene things while on the bench, but because of this overarching ban on the courthouse, nobody has proof of it. They're doing it on purpose to try to hide the crimes of all of these judges, the court the court workers, the bailiffs, the clerk of court, all of these people. And that's why they continue to make sure that this thing is not ever touched. Now, this county attorney gets back to me today. He says, I see no issue with it. As a matter of fact, I helped write it. And I'm like, Mr. Craig Garrett, this is an amazing piece of evidence that you just gave to me. Thank you. So now I can add you into whatever future litigation we impart on Blount County, because you are depriving us of our rights that are secured and protected by the Constitution, and you are preventing us from documenting the crimes that are happening in the Blount County Justice Center. So that's kind of an ongoing thing right now. Like I said, I have released the petition. It clearly states on the front, there's a huge watermark. Nobody can miss it. It says that it was drafted. This is citizen redress of grievances, and for the petition for writ of ouster, it's just a draft. It's not filed. But I wrote it in such a way that it could be filed, being the state of Tennessee versus Sheriff Barong, because he's enforcing this order. Every time anybody walks in, and if you're not an attorney, court appointed, whatever, if you're not part of their little gang, you're pretty much screwed.
Yes.
So
we'll have to talk about this offline because something triggered in my mind, but I can't talk about it obviously on stream, but we'll talk after.
Well,
But
let me talk about one more thing.
yeah, go ahead.
This, if you don't mind. We
Go
don't
ahead.
talk about this often. I would love to argue and debate, and I'm preparing a memorandum of law to send in response to Mr. Garrett, the county attorney, to Mr. Garrett's response to me. But we've been focused on the First Amendment regarding this overarching portable device ban over this courthouse. I would love to debate somebody. Mr. Garrett would love to debate you on this. You're a seasoned attorney. I think it would be interesting and entertaining at least. So the Second Amendment is equally as important in this, because when you consider the Supreme Court and what the Supreme Court has ruled over time, they've admitted that the Constitution does evolve with technology. And our laws evolve with technology. So if that is true, then why would it be that the Second Amendment does not also evolve with technology? And when you read the Second Amendment, it just says that we have a right to bear arms, right? So we're bearing arms that was put in place by our founding fathers to make sure that we could have a way to defend ourselves against a tyrannical, overarching, zealous government that's trying to take over and not be the government that we, the people, had established. In doing so, with this portable device ban and any other time that you're not allowed to record these crimes that are happening in court, that is also a Second Amendment right violation, because we have a right to protect ourselves. We have a right to bear arms, and that bear arms does not necessarily mean a black powder gun or, a gun with a bullet. Does that
Yes.
make sense?
Yes, because like it'd be like treason. If you only regulated treason to the weapons that they had during the time the Constitution was written, no one would be able to commit treason, right? Like, I mean, it's just nonsense, right?
Absolutely.
So they
So we're gonna.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No,
No,
so I'm going to start arguing. I'm going to prepare a rebuttal that also includes, so the 14th Amendment, that's kind of a given, but also the Second Amendment. Now you're violating a Third Amendment, which is the Second Amendment, by not allowing us to come into court, record all of the, if you guys are recording us, if the government's recording us, CCTV cameras, the body cams that are on the bailiffs, all the things, you guys are recording us, we have a right to record you. The fact that you want to be the sole custodian of all of these records so that you can alter, amend, and destroy whatever these judges are saying on the bench, that's not going to happen anymore. We're really done. We the people of Blount County, Tennessee, are so done right now with all of these judges and the criminality of the sheriff and all of the other individuals that are in on this stuff.
Oh yes. This needs to get dealt with. I just should have play a short ad here, and then we'll be right back and continue this conversation.
Okay. I will be here.
Okay.
Hello friends, my name is Keisha and I'm a proud member of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. And I'm also a survivor of human trafficking. My trafficking began in Saskatchewan, moved into Alberta, and even crossed into the United States. I was stalked, hunted, and ignored by the very systems over the last 5 years that were meant to protect me. This is why, with my father Dale Richardson, we started the Karis Project. This is an Indigenous, survivor-led movement for humanity dedicated to exposing trafficking, government corruption, and holding institutions accountable. One of the most powerful tools that we are using is the petitions for redress of grievances. These are lawful constitutional actions rooted in Canadian and US law, and in treaties that tie us together across provinces, across states, and even across borders. These petitions are precedent-setting. They create a binding record. They demand accountability while representing reconciliation in action. Indigenous and non-Indigenous people working side by side to preserve liberty for all. But we cannot do this alone. We need your help to keep this movement alive, to raise awareness and to build a legacy of justice for Indigenous women, for trafficking survivors, and for families everywhere. Thank you. Please stand with us. Your support makes this work possible. Together we can restore justice, heal families, and defend freedom. And I will close with my favorite quote. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who cannot be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. And men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. Thank you.
So yes, if you want to support the fight against the human trafficking and all the injustices and so forth, you can support. There's the donor box, the Give, Send, Go. There's also, you can go to mypillow.com /the Karis Project or /Karis and buy some of the good products that they have over there. Or if you're watching on Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, or Vocal, you'll see other links in the description for merchandise like this and other good stuff that we have there. So, yes, back to what we were saying.
That was beautiful.
Hey, that's my.
It was so awesome. I almost started crying, but also I didn't realize that you were looking into the treaties, which is interesting.
Oh,
I've been
yes.
looking into it just a little bit. Can you talk about that? Because that's really, yeah.
This is tied to the family courts. You see, Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution is being the most trampled on section of the Constitution, and that's the Supremacy Clause. And treaties go along with this, right? And when you look at the way that they, for example, the J Treaty, and they never actually formally, lawfully repudiated the J Treaty because they didn't conquer the British and they did not formally go to Senate and repeal the treaty. These are the only ways that you could do it legally, according to the Constitution. And then they continue to pass it along into the treaty again, right? Which then again still passed the natives the ability to cross, right? And have free trade and so forth.
Okay.
And then Canada did something interesting. They did this thing called the Indian Act after they went ahead and deprived the Métis, which they were, most of them were American, right? Because even the ones in Canada had to register their births in the United States, because a lot of them in Minneapolis or in North Dakota or wherever, because Canada was like the Wild Wild West, right? There was nothing here, like a fort at Winnipeg, and that was it. And so they would go across the border to do that. And so a lot of them were cross border, and they had that whole area for their trapping area. But the problem is because a lot of them were mixed race. They understood English, French, and a bunch of native languages. So when they came in to start the province of Manitoba, I mean, when they started to take the Rupert's Land into Canada, when the British were like, okay, we're going to make it a country because we don't want the Americans coming and fighting us to try to expand. And so what they did then was the Métis were like, hell no. And they made a Bill of Rights. And they asked for judges that were voted on, and sheriffs that were elected like the Americans, because a lot of them were familiar with that system. Well, that didn't go very well. And they created the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to destroy them. And so that put down, and then they hung Louis Riel after that, and he was the only person in Canada to be executed for treason. And they did that, and then they started to sign the other treaties. But what they ended up doing in the United States was, in the 50s, they put in blood quantum. And this is when Canada and the United States, if you watch the way they had their policies for the natives, they were almost in lockstep. And they had the 60 scoop where they started to take the native children and adopt them out. They did this the same time in the United States, and then they had the blood quantum that you couldn't freely cross the border unless you had 50% blood quantum. Well, that became problematic because, for example, if you're mixed race, then that would exclude you. But then even if you were full native, you could have a parent that came from 2 tribes and another parent that was from 2 different tribes. And so you're 25% of 4 tribes, but then you don't qualify for blood quantum. It's nonsense, right? And so they created, yes, because treaties were made with nations, not races. This is what people have to fundamentally understand. How, the regions that they had, those were nations. Even though they had tribes, they were groups of people that they made treaties with because they were tied to land use and a system of governance. And all of them were varied. Most people don't understand this. But when they began to infringe on this, and Canada and the United States both did this, this is where they began to trample other rights. Because when you allow that to happen, people were just like, who cares, right? A lot of people didn't see natives, right? Because they're reclused. And then in a lot of places, some people were just racist, right? And that was just the mindset. But then on top of that, the judges, the U.S. Constitution, treaties, and federal law are binding on every judge in every state. So it doesn't matter what the state constitution says, they have to agree with the U.S. Constitution, the treaties, and then the federal laws. And you have things like the Torture Convention that prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, which is what they're doing. And in a lot of cases, it's torture. And you can't do that, right? So you have all of this. And so effectively, there's no supremacy clause. So when the states are doing this, and then they're taking children and they're putting them in places where they're being abused, this is domestic violence, right? Constitutionally speaking, not like relationship with domestic violence. I'm talking about domestic violence in the country. So you have a state agency
Yeah.
harming children systematically. That's domestic violence. 100%.
Yes.
Yes.
I've never thought of it like that. That is genius.
And this,
Okay, so when you say the treaties, are you talking about all the treaties are over
all
the judges?
every treaty that they have is binding. They can't violate a treaty, right? And what the U.S. does,
All binding.
yes, and what the U.S. does, and this is not constitutional because you go back and read the Federalist Papers, and John Jay talks about this, about the treaties, how they use federal law to change the treaties. You can't do that. That's not the way they designed it. And John Jay tells you this. He tells you that you can't just take Congress to limit a treaty. One, because you don't want to. What country wants to enter an agreement with the United States, and you have to hold up your end of the bargain, but we can change it? He's like, that's nonsense. That's going to create problems. And secondly, he goes, Congress does not have power over the treaties because the treaties belong to the executive, and they are ratified by Senate, and it has a different mechanism. So you can't just come in domestically and make a change to that. This is what he says in the Federalist Papers. And so the Immigration and Nationality Act is in violation of the Constitution right now, right? And this is one of the reasons why they do what they do, because they're using sections of the laws that should be struck down, right? Oh, yes.
That's very interesting. So you're talking about this domestic violence, right?
Yes.
So where does it come into domestic terrorism? Do you know that? Do you know? Like, how can we argue that?
It is. There is terrorism because of the way that it's implemented, with widespread, cruel, and unusual punishment and torture used to suppress people. Yeah. And if you look at the way that the terrorism laws, I actually articulate this in my engineering reports. I did a whole section on the analysis of risk and the retaliation and what was done and what laws are broken because of this. So the point is, the domestic violence is extremely important, because this is why what my daughter talked about, using Article 4, Section 4, because domestic violence is where you sit down and say that you have the guarantee clause in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution that guarantees a republic, right? And if you're having domestic violence, then you have the ability to use the powers in Article 4, Section 4, right, to put it down. And if Congress has to pass laws, but if there's severe harm, you literally have a system of slavery operating in the states, and the government is responsible for it. This is when this is happening, because the federal government is designed to put the states in line when they're not following the Constitution, right? And that's where they can use executive orders right off the bat to start hauling these people off the bench, arresting people pending investigation and pending Congress dealing with this. Well, how is that going to happen? Because you're not going to walk up to them and say, oh, you got me, I'm just going to follow the law. No, it's going to take a lot of pressure. And this is really what it comes down to. Even though there's no weapons, this is still war. And the same mindset applies, right?
Absolutely.
It's going to take
I was looking that up the other night. What exactly could the President of the United States, whoever he or she is, what could the President of the United States do in order to help us, especially those of us in juvenile and family court? And really the only thing that I came down to was that they can do executive orders to instruct the Department of Justice or the FBI to look into the deprivation of rights. And then it kind of pointed me back to this 18 USC 241 and 242. Do you know of anything else that the president him or herself could do?
Of course you can. There's a lot of things they can do. And because of what was done. Now, one of them is the sheriffs. The sheriffs are part of the executive, and they swear an oath to the Constitution, and they can order them to do whatever they need to do. The next thing they can do, they can initiate the militia to work with the sheriffs in order to deal with this, because they're going to need a lot of help. And then in the case, for example, with the biological weapons, they can send in the military to go in and deal with the investigation for the biological weapons, which is like the shots and all of that other stuff, the nasty stuff they're cooking up. They need to send the military in to go in and seize all that stuff, quarantine it, and then figure out what to do next, right? So he has all of those options on what to do. But the biggest thing they need to do is to go ahead and start, pulling those people off of the bench and whatever else needs to be done. I don't care. Get them off the bench, sort it out, arrest them, charge them, investigate, whatever, but get them off the bench in the meantime and say, you're not leaving here until this is done, and put an ankle bracelet on. I don't care. Lock them up. Just get them off the bench. Stop them from harming kids. Right?
Right.
Because when I was talking to Mitch Snow and I was looking at his case and I was like, why are these people not in jail? Like, a kid's telling you I'm being abused. And
Right.
you're going to sit down and say, no, and then go after the father? Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I'm like, you need to seriously investigate these things. So the kid's old enough to say, I'm pretty sure he knows what he's talking about. And when I was reading through that, kids don't make that stuff up. That's not instruction. That is, I could tell when kids have been parroting something because they will just repeat certain things, but kids will say things that they're not even realizing are critical pieces of information because they're relating something that's true.
Exactly. Yeah. Or sometimes they'll say it indirectly too.
Yes.
Just in passing, or yeah, I get it. When you look at a child that has been coached versus one who has not, the evidence is substantially different.
Yes.
You can tell. I mean, a child that has been abused in a certain way versus a child that has only been coached or made to believe that they've been abused, the forensic interviews are so vastly different. And I think that this is part of this terrorist movement on our families. I'm starting to wonder if this is are we involved in a psyop? Because when you look back at American history and you think about, Operation Paperclip and then Mockingbird and what was the other one where they did like Woodstock and what was that? I forgot.
No, not MK Ultra.
Where they were introducing LSD.
Yeah, that was probably
society.
part of the MK Ultra because they did
MK Ultra. Yes, that one. So when we look back at all of these other operations that we can now look at and see, yep, this was a real thing. Sometimes I wonder, are we part of an operation like that to where they're trying to literally break or split the personality of a child so that they can either create a more compliant society later,
Yes.
The next generation, 20 years, or they can create freaking warriors that they're still able to control. People are still compliant, but people that go through extreme, especially children, when they go through this extreme trauma as a child, and snatching a child away from loving, healthy, fit parents is extreme trauma. So are they doing this to try to just create a more compliant society, or are they doing this to build their next army? What exactly is going on is what I keep, trying to really kind of dig into. I feel like children, and mine a little bit younger, in 20 years back or maybe children, at some point they're going to be like, my grandmother was part of that. My grandfather was part of that. They were part of that operation and they fought it. They kind of screwed up their operation just a little bit.
It's a bit of both. Like I was talking to someone and they told me we were talking about feminism and they said, go ahead and look into first wave feminism. So I said, okay, I did a deep dive, and the same globalists that were tied to doing everything dirty were tied to doing that. And yes, not saying that women shouldn't be treated fairly or anything like that, because we have equal rights as human beings. We're different, but we have equal value. But they use this to destroy people, because if you look at what they did meticulously, they created a war in the home. They created adversarial, the family disputes became adversarial and profitable. So now when you look at what's happening today, you have like the red pill on one side that just hates women, and then you have the feminists on the other side that hate men. Like, this is not the way things are supposed to work. And you're wondering, people aren't having as many children. and everything else like that, the population collapsed. You're watching all this mass immigration, which wouldn't be justified if people were having children. The cost of everything skyrocketing and everything else. Like, this is how you create a population that you can control. Because before, when you had families, the mothers were the ones who were making sure the children learned what they did properly. The father made sure that nobody came in and dealt with him. Otherwise, you were probably dead. And so forth, for going after his wife and children. But now that whole thing is broken because most people aren't abusive. It's just, there's always stupid people. Like, let's be real. But it wasn't like the way people try to paint it, like women were living like getting dragged out by their hair by cavemen. That was just really not it. Some people were abused, yes, and that needed to be dealt with. But everybody else got punished and were worse. And now who's got control of our kids? The state. And what are they putting in our kids' mind? Look at what happened to all those kids that are shooting off places. They just don't have any way to defend themselves or to deal with life.
Right.
And that's why the family court is treason.
It's true. Yeah, the breakdown of the family. And they've done this to, I mean, they've already done it. And they started with the Native Americans or Indigenous people, whatever, however you want to present it. So they started with the natives, and then attacking the Black communities, removing the fathers, putting them into prison. And now for some reason we think that we're just kind of shocked. But this is where, when you go to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., when you walk out the door, there's this saying or quote that's on the wall, and it's from a pastor. And I'm going to botch it up. I'm just going to give it to you as I remember it. But he basically said that first they came for the Unionist, but I wasn't a Unionist. And then they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for the, the Democratic Party, but I wasn't a Democrat. So he didn't ever speak up for any of those people. And then when they started to come for him, it was too late because no one was left to speak for him. And, when I saw that, it never left my mind, because I remember being that person where if a Democrat was being attacked, I didn't care. I would just let it go, viciously attacked. If, someone else that had a different viewpoint from me was attacked, I would just stand back and be like, oh, that's what you get for having this independent thought. I was a completely different person 5 years ago than I am now, thanks to family court. And so that's the positive that I think that's coming from this. But we need to remember that this is happening to everybody. And I think that we're at a point in American history where if we do not stand up as a population, as an entire population, all 385 million of us, however many there are, if we do not stand up, we are absolutely doomed. We're lost. We're going to be gone. And I don't know how we will ever be able to actually recover. I don't know how our children are going to recover. When you consider the 12 million children that have already been placed into state custody over the last however many years, when you consider that, and then the fact that now they've lost their sense of self, they don't know anything about their culture. And if they do, it's very minimal. Now they don't have any actual roots. They don't have any ties to a certain location. How are they going to be raising their family when they have absolutely no one to base that off of? They didn't have a mom, they didn't have a dad. And the statistics of having rape, abuse, molestation, starvation, all of these rates, they increase by 80% for every child that enters into foster care.
Of course they do.
So let's just say that, you have 100 children. Out of those 100 children, at some point, 70 of those children are going to have some form, this is the statistics, some form of involvement in some type of state custody, whether that's your parents are just going through a divorce, you've been taken by CPS, you're being investigated by CPS. I just found out that in some states, if you have an insurance claim that pays out more than $10,000, those children actually have to go to probate court, and they become a custodian of probate court. because of an insurance payout. People don't know what is actually going on. Anyway.
Answer this question. This is people who need to understand this and think about this for a second. The Child Protective Services, they report to the legislative branch because they're generally a ministry of one of those things. Because generally, you have the Attorney General, right? The governor, and the Secretary of State and the Lieutenant Governor, and that's the executive. That's it, right? That's it.
Yeah.
And the Secretary of State is really just like the literal secretary for the executive that doesn't actually have any power, but just puts out the orders that they give. So really, it's only those three people. So why is it when you have these forensic interviews and investigations, why is the police, which are part of the executive, given their power over to something that's part of the legislative?
Interesting.
They shouldn't.
I don't know.
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't. I've never thought about it or had it presented to me that way, but you're right.
Because
that's really interesting.
Yes, because they don't have the protections and the safeguards in that aspect. And this is why there's no due process, right?
Right.
And the fact that police are calling them, they need to be retrained and they need to be dealt with because they have no authority. They have no accountability for this. Police, it's a lot different if they keep letting like pedophiles and then these pedophiles keep harming people and it's on police record. This is why they do this. This tells, when I sit down and look at this, I look at something and I'm like, okay, what can somebody do wrong with this? And every person who's should be in places should be doing this because I analyze risk and I have to think in engineering, if something goes wrong, somebody's dead and I can't get them back. So you want to make sure that somebody's not going to die. But when you see things like this, you know that a branch that's not the executive should not have any powers that belong to the executive. And anybody who sits down and says that this is okay, you're responsible, right? Because
100%.
Should have never passed this. And so they have to fix this. The only branch that can fix this is the legislative. It's the only one.
You're right about the only branch that can fix it. However, if we have judges that were actually ruling according to what the legislators have put in place and not violating those laws, it all works together for sure. So that's one of the reasons why I appreciate the people that are approaching the legislative branch, trying to change laws, whatever. My thing is, these judges, even if you can change a million laws, they could be fantastic laws, but if the judges are not going to follow what we already have, are they going to matter? You know? So there's a lot of things. You know, there's one, well, no, I'm not going to go public with that yet.
There's one thing when it talks about the legislative, and people think about the legislative branch as just writing laws. And they do write laws, but that's not all they do. When it talks about the constitutional petition for redress of grievances, that's a hell of a lot more urgent than a law. And then because the legislative is the will, once the will is there, then you can get the sword involved, which is the executive branch. So this is why you go to the legislative branch to then push the executive branch to bring the hammer down on what needs to be done swiftly. And this is the things that people were not taught about how the government works. And if you go back and read the Federalist Papers, this will become very clear. And people also have to understand that these were a bunch of men that were talking about war to other men because they weren't bringing this to women back in the day. They were doing this to men. And men speak very differently when they speak to other men than they do with women. Because I was raised with 5 women. I do not understand how they think. They communicate very differently. And it's necessary, but I just don't understand it because I'm not a woman. But so men will see things in these things because they were written by men for other men. And this is why they need to work together because women also pick up things that are necessary. Very detail oriented. And I love having women around because they will pick up everything. Because when you're like, oh, no,
they're like, to it. We don't forget.
Well, yes. And it's necessary. And then you can have the guy there that's like, okay, I'll deal with the war stuff. Just make sure everything's safe. And that's makes sense when you look at the roles of a father and a mother, because a mother has to pick up every detail, because the smallest thing could, next thing you know, you don't have a child. Your child's dead. So you have to pay attention. Men, we don't. We have to make sure we have to assess what's the greatest threat and how do we need to eliminate it. Right?
It's true.
And so,
Absolutely. I like your approach on the legislative branch and their role and duty, responsibility in this fight. You know, there was a story up in, I think it was South Dakota, North or South Dakota. Anyway, mother wanted to have a natural birth at home. She had labored for a couple days, decided to go to the hospital just to see if there was any complications. They ended up taking her baby. They already had the baby adopted out. The files showed that they had started the adoption process 2 days before that baby was born. So somehow she was already in their system. Now, they had some connections to some of the legislators that were in, I think it was South Dakota. And so the family was able to contact the legislative branch. All the legislators in South Dakota, they petitioned on their behalf CPS, and they literally said, CPS, you need to show us exactly when you started this adoption process and all of the grounds as to why you took this woman's child. Do you know CPS returned that baby back within like 48 hours? Because
yeah,
they had nothing.
yes,
It was 100% child trafficking of that baby. But we
yes,
can take that specific case and we can apply that, and we can actually use that as a precedent for the duty of the legislative branch, as well as what they're able to do. I'm wondering sometimes, I'm like, y'all all got elected, but do you actually know do you know how powerful you are? Do you know what your duty is? Do you know what your responsibility is? Do you know when we do come to you with a redress of grievance that you just can't toss it in the trash and say, oh, this is just a disgruntled parent? No, we are coming to you with crimes against children and parents and elderly individuals, crimes against taking property from families unjustly. I mean, we're coming to you with crimes. You guys don't just get to throw it away and put it in the shredder box and then walk off and have your nice dinner with all the other legislative branch.
It's because they keep people isolated. This is how they do it, and they ignore it and shuffle it off. This is why it's done. And if you notice and talk to people, you can see whenever somebody's trying to expose this kind of stuff or deal with it, they're getting isolated, they're getting targeted, and they're getting harassed and destroyed because they want things to stay the status quo. And the people that are trying to bring people together, they get destroyed the most, right? Because they don't want this. Because we have to remember, and constitutionally speaking, I tell people this, you read the Declaration of Independence, and when they came out and after they listed all these issues that were going on, they said our humble petitions were met with repeated injury, right? And then what happened? They penned the Declaration of Independence. The petition for redress of grievances is mentioned in the First Amendment for a reason. Because if that fails, then the Second Amendment is there to back it up, because you're not listening, because that is exactly what happened when they did this. And they were like, we went to you and you did not do this. So we had to write the Declaration of Independence and kick you guys out. And that's right. Really where it is. And so when you come in there, you're telling them, constitutionally speaking, this is your last chance. This is your final straw, and you have to be relentless. And this is what people understand. It's like a criminal driving down the highway at a high-speed chase. They know that there's going to be a police down the road that's going to put a spike belt, but they're still trying to get away with everything in them, and this is what we're dealing with. And so we have to put our foot down on them to make sure that this stops. It's really it.
It's true, 100%. At one of the last county commission meetings that I went to, I paraphrased a portion of the Declaration of Independence where it clearly says that in the event that the government becomes oppressive to the people, that it is not only our right, but it is our duty to overthrow the government. And that is not us becoming an enemy of the state. That is us actually being more patriotic than the people who are supposed to be the most patriotic individuals of our country, the people who are serving us, the people who call themselves a public servant, call themselves the public officials. These are the people who are supposed to be serving us, protecting us. The laws of the United States exist to protect the people from the government. It is not to protect the government from the people. And we have gotten way far off track here. And I think that we could probably pinpoint that back to our public school education, because we are way too focused on liberal arts and sports and not as focused on how do you actually protect yourself after you graduate? What are your rights? Why are our children graduating after 12 years of education? Why are they graduating not even able to name the First Amendment of the United States Constitution? Why is it that 100 years ago, when you were graduating out of the 8th grade, those children had to memorize the entire Constitution in order to graduate? And now here we are, 2026, and nobody can name anything.
Because they changed the way things were done. Before, we had a society that was kind of balanced, where you had influence from mom and dad, and that was kind of how you had to reflect in society. Now we have it shifted more towards the women as towards the men. The men are becoming feminized, and when men become feminized, become violent. This is why you're seeing so much crime, because they can't regulate. Masculinity is not bad. It's actually good. It's protective, and it deals with these types of things. But when you feminize men, they don't have what they need as men to operate as men, and they become weak and they become violent. They lose their minds, right? And if you then again push women towards the masculine and try to make them like men, mental health issues with women are on the rise. Well, you're not supposed to be a man. Men are not supposed to be women. We're different, and it's necessary. Without this, our society collapses, and you're watching this happening in your face. Like I tell people, being a mother is the number one job on planet Earth, and being a father is number two. If you can't get those rights, we got nothing. And if we don't do that, and they don't work without working together. And this is where we need to start going back to helping families that are struggling, rather than taking their kids and splitting them up and profiting from it. Do you know what I'm saying? Obviously, if there's abuse, then you have to do what you need to do, but then there should be criminal charges. I don't want to see none of this CPS nonsense. If there's abuse and they're committing crimes, put them in prison. Right?
I agree. I think what we're seeing also is our government is preying on the lower socioeconomic status of our nation. And I have heard thousands, literally thousands of parents who lost their children because they were poor. In the meantime, said foster care parents down the street were making anywhere from $500 to, I've heard as much as $2,500 a month to care for this other person's child. Whereas this parent that loved their children dearly, if they just had a little bit of help, a lot of them were just no drug issue, no alcohol issue. I mean, they had their life together. Something happened. They got in a wreck. Their house burned. Something happened, and they just weren't able to quite get back on their feet. And in the meantime, now that they're poor, they can't support their children or whatever. I mean, it really is as fast backwards as you can come up with, as far as a system that has been designed to make it appear like they're actually doing good. There is no good with CPS. If I was going to try to abolish anything, I've heard, abolish family court, abolish this, abolish that. I would say we need to get rid of CPS. And we need to take that, what CPS was originally designed to do. It was to protect children. And I think we need to give that into a little small, very small department within the sheriff's department. Let that be just a few people, because if there is really a crime against a child, it's going to go to the sheriff's department anyway. The report needs to be filed, and then we can proceed.
This is the point I was making. You have a branch of the legislative branch that is exercising powers of the executive. it can't exist.
Yeah.
That can't exist. And if it
Yeah.
was going to exist, yes, it should be part of the executive and follow due process, right? Like if you
Right.
see probable cause and the police see probable cause, then they do something, then they lay charges, right?
Yes.
If there's
Absolutely.
something
Yeah.
that you can help them with, like if they're having addiction, whatever, help give them the option and say, listen, we can give you the option to do this. And if not, then, well, you're going to have to face consequences. But at the end of the day, even bad parents are still better than putting them in care. This is the thing most people don't understand. It's only in the
100%.
worst cases that it's actually better for the child, but in most cases it's not. Right? And so
It's 2%. It's 2% of children. So you take 100 children from parents, only 2% of those children you can actually prove legitimate abuse and neglect. The other 98 that have been removed, you cannot prove it. They can't even come close to it. And that's CPS's own reports. It's forensic interview reports, it's psychologist reports. I mean, this is a very consistent statistic across the nation. West Virginia's CPS came out just a few weeks ago, and they did their own audit. And their report, their audit said the same thing, that 98% of the children that were removed should not have been removed in the first place.
oh,
And
oh
I'm
yeah.
sitting thinking, why are these people getting paid? Why are we still, as a society, why are we paying these jokers to come in and take our children away from us?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because criminals wanted this to be done. They have to justify their budget, and a lot of people don't understand the tie between COVID and the whole family court issue. And I would tell everybody to go and start reading some work from Dr. Jim Thorpe and his wife. Okay, HHS funds all the child protective services in the states. They even fund some family courts and some tribal courts as well. I did some looking on this myself. They also were funding like the shots for COVID and all that sort of stuff, right? And so
Family court.
no, HHS, who funds the child protective
Okay.
services, same thing,
Okay.
right? So now what happened during COVID? Divorces were on the rise. The illegal immigrants started flooding even higher numbers across the border. And because the families are breaking down, more children are getting apprehended. Then you have the transgender genders being pushed to a higher level during this time because the trauma that children are going through makes it more effective for them to be groomed in this manner. And so now you're creating the circumstances for widespread trafficking, and people are getting poorer and poorer, and poverty is something that is heavily associated with human trafficking and the loss of property. This is why in the natives, like especially here in Canada, the natives don't have individual property rights. When they have the reserves, the federal government is basically the landlord, and they're on the tenant. Because you look at the Indian Act, it never says ownership. It says possess. You have possession of it, but you don't own it. And this is the reason. Oh, yes. So reserves, it's hard for them to get business because they can't sell land to anybody because they don't own it. It's like you can't sell your apartment, right? So then this puts them in a position of dependency, and this is contributing to trafficking rates. So what they did with the natives, they're going to do this to everybody. This is what they're doing in real time right now. We're watching it happen.
Yeah.
And it's got to stop. Like this is 100% like criminal organization. This is like, I mean, I showed that they're engaging in prohibited racketeering activity, and in Canada it's even easier to prove a criminal organization, and it fits the bill of what they're doing because they're using the court. I don't care where it is. If I see the elements of crime somewhere, it's a crime. You can't steal children. You can't give them to be exploited or use the force of the state to keep them raped. Like what kind of world are we living in? Like honestly, like
I know.
I can't even believe I'm having these conversations. Like
I would have never thought it. Like I remember when I said 5 years ago I'm a completely different person than I am today. Even I would just say 2 years ago, If somebody came to me and told me the things that I know now, I would have thought that they were crazy. And that's where it comes into trying to educate. We've got to educate that these things are really happening. And I think that you and I and some other national advocates, we just need to sit down and kind of put our heads together and really get creative to make sure that all of our neighbors, everybody on this street, every neighborhood, that they all know what's actually happening. And this is apolitical. I don't care what side of the aisle you sit on. I don't care if you're Muslim, Christian, atheist, Jewish. I don't care. It has nothing to do with that. A lot of people kind of connect us with being a political organization. Nothing to do with that. 100% about children, protecting the children, and making sure that not one more child is ever raped, molested, sodomized
I'm so
in
pedoph-
foster care.
pedophilia is not a political issue. If you're going to sit down and say that you're not going to help
No.
somebody, kid who's being raped because of politics, you're a part of the problem. And as far as I'm concerned, you're a pedophile because you're allowing that to happen.
Yeah.
Because I don't care what, I don't care if it's my worst enemy. I'm not going to let somebody rape their kid because no kid deserves to be raped. Like, come on.
Mm.
Like, yeah, I get what
I'm
you're
with
saying.
you.
Because I can't stand it. And I see this happening. This is one of the things that I'm going to say this because this grinds my gears so much. People will say, oh, I don't like this or I don't like this. I'm like, okay, let's say somebody was a thief, let's say. Now, is it worth letting children get raped because of a thief? No, because you know what? You can pay back the money that was stolen, but you can't give back that kid that innocence that was lost when they raped. Like I had my oldest daughter was sexually abused, and I see the damage that it causes and the work that I had to do and all of the things, and it still never goes away. Like I would never want to wish that on anybody ever
Right.
in my life. Like, so I no, like I don't care. I'll figure a way to deal with the things. Let's protect the kids because if we can't protect children, we have nothing. We have nothing.
Right. I agree. I
And
agree 100%.
because this has to stop because I see so many people, even like I watch on social media, I'm watching so much of people talking about personal issues, and I'm like, you realize that, look at the Epstein files. Pedophiles are running this country. You're paying your money to pedophiles, and you're worried about hurt feelings than somebody that can come in at any time and rape your kids. I
know.
mean,
I see these videos often. I don't scroll much, but when I do, somehow I always get a video that has, 50 million views. And it's the dumbest video I've ever seen in my life. And I'm
yes,
like, why are people spending their time watching this? That also has to be some type of a psyop to distract from the things that are actually important, the things that are actually going to save a life, instead of
yes,
watching all these Hollywood, nobodies who are part of it, many of them, by the way. And just we've got to get back to a stable mind,
yes,
to a grounding as an American, as a nation. We have to become grounded and understand these atrocities are happening against our children. Your children, your grandchildren, and or your nieces and nephews, they literally are a gnat's eyelash away from being taken. People don't realize that. They absolutely do not realize that until it's too late. So we've got to figure out how we can get this information out, keep spreading it. Obviously, podcasts, things like this. I think we're going to start doing some type of mailers. Surveys are good. Word of mouth is good. Churches, Dale is up in Canada. I'm obviously down here in the States. I'm nationwide. Call your churches. I would love to come and speak to your churches. Just educate them. Have the nursery. It doesn't have to be a big church. It could be a church of 10 people. I don't care. Bring up these your children in your nursery. 7 out of 10 of those children in that church, odds are, statistics show that at some point in their life, they will have to deal with the state. 3 of them will be taken. We have a 30% child seizure rate with the state right now. So 3 out of those 10 are going to be taken into state custody. 7 of them will experience some type of state trauma in their life. That
And
needs to be known. Where are the churches?
that, that
Where are they?
that's a good question. I was actually just talking to we'll talk when I get off here, because when we get off here, so I talked to a guy that was he's a pastor, and he brought me and my daughter to speak up in his church, and he had got kicked out of his church that he was working at before during COVID because they didn't like what he was doing. But I also got kicked out of my church for standing up for what was right. And other people have gotten kicked out of their churches for this. Yes. The reason being is that a lot of these people that were going in and infiltrating and changing the ideas, they went into the churches first. The reason being is, if you go and read anything that has anything to do with any type of people that are trying to institute totalitarianism, the people that they cannot stand the most are Christians. The reason being, they're not violent, but they're going to be like, I'm not doing it. Too bad, right? They're just like, sorry, I'm not going to do this because God says this and you say that, so I'm not going to do it. And so there's always that resistance, and killing them is not going to help, because when you kill Christians, you make more Christians, right? So it's always bad for business. So they can't stand it. So they go out. This is why the churches, like, they're feminized. Like the men, they're feminized. They're weak. I listen to them. They're predators. A lot of the pastors there, I'm like, you guys are predators. You need to have men in there and not putting women in positions where they're going to be exploited, because I watch these people doing this all the time. And as men, right, we're supposed to look after the ones that mean something to us, and women, because you're not going to go with a man physically with them as a woman. You're not. So when I watch these guys doing these things, I want to, like, literally reach out and strangle them, because I'm like, you guys, like, why? How can you as a man do this to a woman, put her in a situation where she's going to get exploited, and say that you love and care for them, right? Like,
yeah, it's true.
But
it's
yeah,
true. I went to a church in Knoxville, Tennessee, a couple of times, and the first time I went there, the pastor was there, and he was speaking about the election, and he was talking about, be sure that you're looking into who you're voting for, make sure that you're putting people and voting for people who are going to put God first. And I really appreciated that. And so I went up to him after the service, and I was talking with him and introduced myself, told him what I did, told him why I was there, because I don't live there. And I gave him, and he he acknowledged, and he said, I've understood this to be a thing. And I was talking specifically about trafficking, and then trafficking through CPS. And I told him that East Tennessee is one of the largest in the nation for the things that we were talking about. And he acknowledged it. And I gave him my card, gave him my number, and he promised that he would call me. I said, don't forget to call me. When I got ready to walk out, I was like, yes, I know you're going to forget. Don't forget to call me. Show back up the next week. Say the same thing. Do you know I have never heard from that guy? Never heard. And he gets up there, he preaches every single Sunday. And he always talks about the government, because I'm not going to call it the name of the church. People can figure it out if they really wanted to, but he talks about the government often. But I'm like, words and actions, dude. Or do you really care about children? Or are you just kind of using this as a platform? Because we have a place for you out here. We got boots on the ground. Do you want to come be a part of this?
Yes. But this again, when you see men that do this, those are feminine men, because men understand that they speak by their actions. Like, I can say what I want, but I still have to go and do something to make it happen. Like, do you know what I'm saying? This is Men understand these things, and that our actions define who we are. So going out and telling somebody, I'm going to do this, if you don't do this, then you look like a chump. So don't say that you're going to do this if you can't, or if something failed, you say something and be like, look, this can't happen. But now this accountability among men is no longer there, right? Because before, watching a lot of men do things, and when I was a kid, I'm like, guys would get punched in the face for doing this. There's no pushback, no nothing. And now it's just like, do whatever you want, and let's just like play along. No, we need the women to be nurturers. Men, we don't do that. We're not that good. Sure, we can fill in, but we're not. We're the guys that need to go out, and when there's manure that needs to be shoveled, we're the people that go and do it. When there's a problem, to go fix it, we go and solve it. That's where we like to do stuff, right? Because I don't care about feeling good. As long as my loved ones are safe, I'll do whatever needs to be done. And that's what we're here for, right? So
Yeah,
I
absolutely. I love it.
I'm very angry with the weakness of men right now. I'm very
I
angry.
can tell.
Well, it's
It,
just
it's honestly, it's a legitimate concern. I mean, just in my generation, from the time that when I was a child, seeing the men in my community, my grandfather, my uncles, just how they operated, the point boys that I grew up with, who grew into men, are vastly different from this next generation. And I mean, some of my generation too. I guess technically I grew up with some men that turned out to be pretty feminine, and you're right. But the women, we lost during the feminist movement. We lost our connection with other women, and we used to go down. I mean, not me, but they used to go down and have to wash clothes all together in the creek, or go somewhere to wash clothes together. Then all of a sudden you have washing machines in your home, and now all of a sudden the women have lost their connection. Where do they ever go to talk? And now that we're outside of churches, and we're now, you have the women that are having to work in order to supplement the income, because obviously you can't really live off of one person anymore, one person bringing in income. I mean, our whole system is just, we need a complete reset. I think it's coming, but I don't think we need to alter how this reset is going to happen.
yes.
You
And
know?
look, if they, for example, if they had two family homes, like if one wife said, okay, you know what, I'm gonna just work part time and whatever else like that, the people who are producing stuff, they're gonna have to lower their prices because the demand is gonna go down, right? Sure, it's gonna be a little bit tough, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
they did this to make us slaves and then to go after our children. I'm saying women don't work, but when your children are young, you need to be there with your kids. What I don't want,
Yeah.
I know that if I have a child with a woman, I don't want anybody else watching my kid other than the woman, my mother of my child. Why would I want that? Like, I
Yeah.
can't pay someone to love my kid. Like, how does that make
Right.
sense? Right? So
That's what I want to.
so parents have the most interest in the outcome of their children than anybody else.
Absolutely.
So the state, no, thank you. You don't have any rights here. The people who protect the liberty of that child are the parents, not the state,
Right.
the parents, because the children don't have the capacity, and the state does not have the same interests as the parents because God didn't give the children to the state; they gave it to the parents. So too bad for them,
100%.
right? So
100%. I remember Judge Harrington, she looked at me and she said, I am tasked with figuring out what is the best interest of these children. And I about threw up in my mouth, because I'm sitting there like, you'll never be able to love my children and have their best interest more so than me. You just won't. Not in a million years.
well,
And
sorry, go ahead.
it's unbelievable, the things that these judges, they look at our children as line items, and that's it. And for the people who have really dug into this Title IV funding and the federal funding that the courts get for removing children and issuing child support and all the things, that's where we are literally watching this whole enslavement of our society from childhood, from little children. They are enslaving us through our children. They're putting
Yes.
them on the chopping block. They're selling them. They're literally auctioning our children off, either for federal funding or for the adoptive parent who's willing to pay the most to adopt your children.
It,
And that's
it,
what's happening in America right now.
See, yes, and in Canada, in the human trafficking laws, and I've looked at this extensively. They have a term that is called the facilitation of the financial and sexual exploitation. So when you're facilitating this, it's part of a crime. And so when you automatically, for example, eliminate a father from the home arbitrarily, a loving father, you're going to increase the chances of that child being sexually exploited by an insane factor. Yes, it will increase if it's just a single father, but not to the same extent, because the deterrent of the father, the pedophile, goes, if this man catches me, he's going to rip me apart limb from limb with his bare hands if he has to. So this is a deterrent. And so if you have obviously both parents, it's the best. And so when you do this, you're increasing exploitation. And then not only are they doing that, but they're looking for the most unreasonable parent, and they're giving the child to that parent. Like in children, they're like parents that are molesting and abusing their kids. They're giving the child to that parent, and then they're shutting out the parent that's trying to protect their children. And when you're watching this happen, that's problematic because they hold responsibility. And this is where judges, we need to rethink the whole family court thing. You can go and commit a felony and get 10 years in jail and you're out in 3. But you can go and have a family court judge sentence a child 18 years of deprivation of liberty from a parent on a whim,
Right.
with no due process, and then cause irreparable developmental harm. In many cases, is worse than the prison sentence because you destroy their life.
Yeah.
Why? Why
100%.
do we not have the same stringent due process requirements when it comes to kids as they do with the criminal law? Because the consequences can be, in many cases, more severe.
It's true. I don't think they're real courts.
No,
I
they're
actually
not.
specifically asked my judge in court. It was one of my opening statements. I said, Judge, before we get started, I need to understand, in order for me to present appropriately before you today, I need to understand what kind of court you are. Are you a court of equity? Are you a court of record? Are you a judge over a court of law? Are you an administrative officer of the court? When I asked the last little tidbit, she about lost her mind. And when she heard that, she knew when I said, Judge, or are you an administrative officer of the court? She literally said, Miss Saxton, I do not have to answer that question. Moving on. I mean, she just bypassed the whole thing. She wouldn't, and I tried to get her to answer. She would not answer because she knew she was on the record. She also knew that she couldn't really answer that she was any of these other courts because we're there for family court. She had to answer that she was an administrative officer. She's a hearing officer, and that's it. She's not a real judge. And if she was a real judge, she would have to, follow all of the rules and all the laws, which she hasn't. Now, here's the thing. This is where we can get them. Because now you're like, oh, well, what are we going to do? They are purporting themselves to be judges. They're pretending to be a judge, so therefore they're impersonating officials, an elected official. So we can get down into some of the weeds. I do try to stay constitutionally focused whenever I'm arguing some of this stuff, but when I go into court, I am somewhat of an antagonist, but I try to do it in a way that will get things on the record. And that was one thing that I got on the record. The other thing that she said was that as soon as my ex filed for divorce, my children became the custody of the state. At first I was like, I didn't think I heard her right, but I did. She said, as soon as a divorce is filed in Tennessee, the children become custody of the state. And I'm sitting here thinking, all right, well, we need to do some Title 4D investigation into this, because if a child is in the custody of the state, does that mean that even if we, the parents who are going through separation, we still have our children in our care and custody, but yet according to the state, they're in the state's custody?
This was on the
Are they
record?
making money? 100%. Oh, we should talk. I got a lot.
Because I'm going to tell you what the problem with that is. And she just outed herself, because what does the Constitution say? You can't be deprived of liberty without due process of law. Custody is a liberty restriction, and when the state's saying that they're going to just arbitrarily assume custody and control of that child's liberty, where was the due process?
Yeah.
There isn't.
And it's also a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because if they're taking custody, that's seizure of something, whether people want to say seizure of children or seizure of property, whatever, but they're taking custody of something that is not theirs to take custody of.
Yes.
But yeah, that's That's on the record, absolutely on the record. I've got it in multiple places.
And then on top of this, people don't understand how this enslaves the parents. You take away a child from a protective parent, and they will do everything they can to save them. I've watched people go into bankruptcy;
Yeah.
they've lost everything for something that
Yeah.
that had no basis in due process. And if you look at human trafficking laws, if they do something and they use any type of fraud in the courts or simulated court hearings, and a lot of these times these things are off the books or they're doing things that are not sanctioned, that is prohibited under Title 18 under trafficking laws. Everybody needs to go out and read them, right? Because literally what they're doing is constituting trafficking, and now they are putting you into forced. You're getting forced labor or providing a service, and they're taking your money and all of your resources, using your child as the chains of circumstance to keep you there because they know you love your child. And a parent, it would be better to kill the parent than to let the parent see the child suffer and torture, because it'd be more merciful to kill the parent. Like, because that's the worst thing a parent can do. Like, they're like, okay, if I die, fine, but I don't want to die. But my kid being harmed and being had your hands tied behind your back, that's satanic to a level that is, it's, yeah. And so they don't have any right to do that.
Absolutely.
Not
A
at
lot
all.
of people don't realize that these judges are committing capital offenses.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at Title 18,
Mm-hmm.
242 or 242,
Deprivation
you
of
have
rights under
deprivation
color
of
of law.
right. You have fines and you fees if you deprive people. In the event that kidnapping occurs, so these judges are kidnapping our children from us while depriving us of our rights. Kidnapping is there is the option for a capital punishment. I
But
don't think they realize it.
But deprivation of rights under color of law does have a capital punishment all on its own. And then with the fact that they're judges, that's an aggravating factor, and an insane aggravating factor, because it's even worse than a police officer. Because you were supposed to be the restraint on this and allow the people, the courts exist so that the people can restrain the government. That's what they're there for, and settle disputes. That's it. They don't have any other power. But what they're doing is they're ruling by decree. They're using case law and precedent and all these other things to create laws to control things, and they don't have that inherent authority. They don't.
It's true. I never thought about that being a reason to kind of increase the sentencing. It would be like if you have a lifeguard, and then you have a parent or whatever, and a child dies. Both technically could be charged with, second degree murder or whatever. But the lifeguard is the one that should have been the one, kind of watching over, keeping over everything, making sure that everything's that lifeguard is going to get a worse sentence. Same thing with these judges. It's the judge's duty to watch over the children and make sure that the children are actually not being deprived of their rights, that they're not being molested and abused, that they are protected. Our children are protected. They should be. I mean, they've become kind of a throwaway, piece of property in our courts, but that's not how it should be. These judges are here. They should be protecting these children at all costs, and they're not.
Yes, they are. And this is the point. If you can go ahead and do this to children, like, who else is safe? Because children are the ones who need the most protection and should be afforded the most protection. If they're not protected, then none of us have protection. And if people actually look at the courts, and if you go back and read history, go and what is it? I was talking to somebody, History of the Reformation by Merle Aubigny. He's a French dude. Go and look at the way they had trials and courts during the Dark Ages in Europe. And you will look at the family courts and you will see the same thing. They literally have the Inquisition for our children. And this was one of the issues that they raised when the colonists were raising, because the judges were always on the side of the king. This is a problem, a huge problem.
That's unbelievable. It doesn't surprise me. History just repeats itself over and over again.
Yeah,
But
yes, it does.
but we're here, and we're here now, and I'm not going to stop fighting. So they'll have to kill me or give me my children back and put some type of restrictions on CPS and give all of these other parents their children back, correct all of their actions, and arrest a few judges before I will stop. I'm not going to stop.
Oh yes, they need to be arrested. Like, I mean, I just, speaking of the court stuff, I'm just going to pull up a couple of things here just so that you can see here the type of stuff that courts were doing. And where is it here? I'm going to put this up on this. Let me get this here into this screen. Set this up. But this is just kind of showing people what kind of was going on and the criminality that people are doing in this whole situation. So let me put that here. And so, there we go. All right, I'm going to pull this up here. And this is some of the stuff that I was talking to you about offline about the police and so forth. So this is an occurrence report that they put out here, and there's a whole lot of problems with it. They like the timestamp that they have there, the date saying that I resisted arrest on the 22nd of July in 2020, but then they're like, oh, by the way, we arrested him on the 23rd, and he was told to, like, the court told us to, like, keep him out of the court and all this kind of stuff, right? And they admit this here, and they tell you right there. It says that the court told them the day before to keep me out of court, and they went through all this stuff, said the guy that was there filming, this white guy, was my son-in-law. That's the guy who ended up sexually assaulting my daughter. My daughter was married to a black guy. I'm like, I didn't know I had a white son-in-law, and I didn't know this guy was my son-in-law. So this kind of stuff here. Right, and then and then they have the fraud to take my house, right? And they put this here, but let's see where the documents. Oh, there you go. There's my title of my house. And then we look at this. This is what courts are doing. And I saw a woman in Arizona. They did almost the same thing to her. So you can sit down and see their name. I'm listed as a buyer right there, right? Listed as seller. But then you go down and you see here. Boom. Well, there's my name, but that's not my signature. That's my ex-wife's. And then they put her name there, and her name was supposed to be as a buyer, but they put it down there. That's fraud. That's forged document. That's fraud. That's crime.
Oh,
And you see this happening,
yeah.
right? And then you see that there again. And like, these are the kinds of things that went on. Like, I mean, I'm just going to kind of put that there briefly. But this is happening in courts all over the place. All over the place.
Yep.
Like,
It
that's,
happened to me.
yeah. That
Very similar thing.
that's not a lawful sale. And this is where they're protecting it. I went to the police, and the police should be going and investigating, but the police are involved. Because the police, they went ahead and I did a freedom of information request and got all this information where they were like, oh, he ran off and left and everything else like that. And it was like, no, because I was there and I was here, but it was because I went and reported something, and they used this as a way to punish me and gave my ex-wife what she wanted and whatever the case was. Because I'm sure if she knew all of this, she would have never did it, but she did enough wrong to get me strapped to a bed when people lied about it. And I have the evidence of that. Like, and then do this? What's wrong with you? Right? Anybody, this is my thought. I don't care how much I had anger towards like an ex or whatever. Like, for example, my oldest daughter, her mother. We did not get along. Our relationship went sideways, and she was the one where my daughter was, taken and stuff like that. But I still did not treat her with animosity, and I still allowed my daughter to talk to her, even in a limited sense. I didn't cut her off because my daughter would be like, well, why? So I let her see and talk to her mother. I said, you have to be sober. That's fine. I'm not going to hand her over to you to go off and do whatever. That's not going to happen, but you can come anytime, whatever. Be reasonable, because at least the child will get to understand, and it'll be under a controlled environment. Then she'll make a decision for herself. Because the alternative is only when you take a child is only it has to be such a severe situation. And now I'm watching people who have done this, and I see this many times, If you're going to put the other parent in harm to gain your child, you're abusive, because you're abusing your child by taking away their development, and you no longer are fit to be a parent. None.
Yeah.
Because we can't.
It's true. I tried to argue that same thing because my ex-husband put me in a situation. And the thing is, he told me this. I had this on a recorded conversation where he said, if you go through with the divorce or you want to separate, I will bankrupt you. I will make you homeless, and I will take your children. He's done pretty much, I mean, I haven't officially filed for bankruptcy, but he's pretty much done all three things. And he did it on purpose. And he knew that he could do that because he's a nuclear engineer at Tennessee Valley Authority. He has the military. He's 100% permanently disabled from the military, so he gets a $4,000 check every month. I subordinated my career so that I could stay home with the children. And so all of these years, that's all that I did. The children were my life. And so trying to get back into the workforce was very, very difficult for me. And then in addition to the fact that he took thousands and thousands of dollars, now I did have a little stash, thank God, but that's what they did. And when you try to go to the court and say, hey, look, financial abuse is abuse. You know, theft of marital property, if you have a home and half of it's yours, half of it's marital property, but one person takes all of it, that's theft. You know, you can't do that.
This
Judges, it's like they don't care.
this is the people who are behind all of this. They understand the differences between men and women very well, because they attack men and women very differently. And they know that when a woman is under duress, it is going to be harder for her to relate the information when she's under that duress. Because I deal with victims of human trafficking and trauma who have their kids trafficked. I can always tell when it's a woman who's written the information, because the way it comes out, and then the chronological order is out the window, and it becomes very emotional, harder for her to keep composed. And I watch police do this, and they will ask them the wrong questions, so they break down and they brush them off. And I'm like, you guys are criminals, because that's not the way you do this. Because I understand on how you need to do this, so why are you doing this? And so this is why they like to have men and women separated, because then it puts each of them at a disadvantage depending on the situation. And when it comes to like relating information under duress, men have a much better ability to do that, because we're designed to like have to off people if necessary, and we have to be able to be composed in life and death situations. Women are more so find the kid. So they'll put you in there even though you're saying the right things. They're going to ask the wrong questions, and then they're just going to brush it aside. I can almost guarantee you this is what happens. I see it happening all the time. And so and then when women are traumatized, then they become triggered and don't want to deal with men. And then they have more problems when they give them a steady diet of men that are behind pulling the strings where they can't get through. And this is how they do it. And they stick men with women that will just continue to destroy them. I watch this going back and forth. It's just disgusting. It really is.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, I need to get going.
No worries.
I got a couple houses that are related to Epstein I need to go do a drive-by on tonight, so
okay, so
it'll be fun.
Before we close up here, tell people how they can reach you and how they can help you.
Okay, so the best way to reach me is go to justicewithoutlimits.org. If you're on a computer, there'll be a button at the top right corner. If you're on a mobile phone or a tablet, just scroll to about halfway on the homepage. There's a Join the Movement link. Join that. It's like 5 questions. It's not very much. And you will get on my email list. I send an email out every Sunday. Quick updates, things that have happened, things that are coming up in the next week. And then a Zoom link. Our Zoom link, we start a Zoom 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 1:30 Pacific, Mountain Time, and I'm sorry, I jacked that all up. 4:30 Eastern, 3:30 Central, 2:30 Mountain Time, 1:30 Pacific, and 12:30 if you're in Alaska. We're not going to forget our Alaska people. We have a Zoom, and we have anywhere from 80 to we've had over 200 people on the Zoom. But this is kind of where we organize for the week, let people know what we're doing, our next steps. We're kind of moving into phase 2 where we're building out. We also have a Discord. So you'll get a link if you join the movement on justicewithoutlimits.org. Join the movement. You'll also get a Discord a link to Discord. You can join us there. And let's just roll. I'm not asking people to stand with us. I'm asking people to take leadership. That's what I want. We need leaders. We need people who are willing to stand up, willing to speak. You're not going to back down. You're not going to be shady. Don't be shady. And let's just go. Let's roll. We need boots on the ground. We need people that are willing to go and do. And that's what we're looking for.
Yes, we do. And give her a follow. The links are in the description if you're watching on Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, and Vocal. Because I haven't used YouTube for a while, and it'll probably be only a few more minutes before they shut it down again anyway, because I always say things to offend them. And so
Gotcha. Right.
I'll close here with a prayer, and thank everybody for coming. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your love, grace, and mercy. We thank you for the opportunity to call upon your name. And Father, you see the situation where we're at, where all these devil worshippers are running around harming children and doing all manner of evil to them. Father, help the men and the women that they would turn away from their wickedness and come to God and forget about all these other issues and focus on protecting the children who you have given to them as your precious property for them to return to them. But Lord, I ask of you this day to strengthen them, that they would turn away and come together to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, our nation, and that we can have some protection for the children who need it the most. It's my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right.
Thank you
all for